I ain't gonna let none of this trouble rub off on you. You're Ninth Cavalryman, and like I've said again and again, the Ninth's record is going to speak for all of us one day, and it's going to speak clean. I'm Chris Spivey.
And I'm Eddie Webb.
And today on Genreless, we're here to talk about Sergeant Rutledge from 1960. Happy high noon, everyone.
Howdy.
So Eddie, do you understand why in the end I had to do the switch from what was on the sheet versus this one?
See, I was confused because I don't know why you made me watch what is very obviously an episode of Star Trek involving courtrooms.
Just because Captain Pike was there.
Well, that was certainly part of it. Yes, that certainly led me down that road of thinkingness. But then I was like, when I watched the first few minutes, I was like, did Chris give you a courtroom drama? Oh my god, it is a courtroom drama. Oh my god. Okay, maybe it's just the first part. No, the whole thing's a courtroom drama. Oh my god, this is amazing. Ace Attorney, the Wild West, awesome. No, I totally see why you recommended with this. We switched to this, and I can certainly see why you said you would feel weird not covering this in retrospect.
Yeah. So, and the thing is, all right, we talk pretty low. We're a low key podcast here. I haven't had a lot of time. Normally, if it was something like this, I would have done a lot more in depth actual research and prepared, because I think I've seen this Western now twice, counting watching it for the podcast here. And given everything on my end, sometimes I try to find things that talk about some of the episodes we're going to do if I have spare time to read about them.
Right.
And one or two of the things I did see, because not a lot of people talk about Sergeant Rutledge, regardless of whether or not it's a great film or a bad film, there isn't a lot of coverage of it versus the other John Ford films.
Right.
Which of itself is indicative and telling. But one of the things that kept popping up that I did see is people try to consider this one of John Ford's 3 apology westerns, or like his later work, to be more of an apology for his earlier perspective on the western.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did notice that because when I was, when it's my turn to just watch, I try to do a ton of research, but I had a question, so I looked something up, and I inadvertently landed on the Wikipedia page, and I noticed that a reference to that and the hot link on Wikipedia leads to a definition of white guilt. So that tells you exactly how that's being framed. But as a note, because the second John Ford film, I was also curious of like, okay, what are considered to be John Ford's greatest films? And usually his late 50s and 60s works never seem to show up on that list, right? The impression I get is that culturally it seems to he had a downward trend, which is weird because like this seems like it's just as strong and powerful from a directing standpoint as Stagecoach was, right?
Yeah. And funnily enough, though, like The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance is also considered amongst the apology ones, because it's sort of like addressing the Western myth of itself, which is incredibly popular and successful movie. And part of it is, from what I remember, because one of the reasons I didn't want to do multiple directors is I didn't want to go into the lives of the directors in a great extent. I kind of want to touch on the work itself.
Right.
And John Ford, I think we've said the first time, is considered to be a universal asshole, just like the ultimate troll of trolls for when you're associating and dealing with him.
Right.
There are countless interviews of people trying to interview him and just talk to him, like saying, hey, what do you think of your work and so on? So, like, how did you do X or Y? I shot it on film. Boom. End of statement. It's like, what?
Right.
And an example of some of like John Ford's attitudes is, for instance, there was a scene in this where he wanted Woody Strode, who we'll come back to Woody Strode in a second, Woody Strode to have like a certain level of weariness and not gravitas, but like emotional toil on him. So part of the rumor that I remember hearing is he told him that he had his wife come and tell him that she's divorcing him and left the set. And then Ford took Strode out drinking all that night and told him, don't worry, we're not going to shoot tomorrow. And the next day, when he was drunk and dealing with the thing his wife was going to leave him, they shot like his big courtroom scene.
Oh, wow, what a dick. But it
But
worked.
then there's this weird thing though that supposedly Strode is one of the people that took care of Ford later in his life when he was ailing. So
Mm.
it's like levels of complexity that you can't understand, that I don't have enough context for to be able to properly represent to our listeners, which is one of the reasons I wanted to like stay more of a surface level for the work, because that would have been a lot of directors. We'd have to like delve into their lives to bring that information forward.
That's interesting because, I do feel like there's a Hollywood ethos, as it were, where basically assholes get a certain amount of leave from their actors, and I think it depends on the basis. Like, I remember I'm gonna make this about Transformers because of course I am. Um, when I went to a Transformers convention a couple of years ago, one of the big things they were talking about is, a couple people had, uh, I'm trying to make it as short as possible. Uh, in 2023, Paramount liquidated a couple of very iconic movie sets. It was a cost cutting measure, and as part of that, a whole bunch of old tapes were literally thrown into a dumpster.
Are we talking about
Uh,
Doctor Who again?
no, no, but it's close. So one of the people involved in that noticed a bunch of tapes were actually unedited audio tapes from a lot of the Sunbow cartoons of the 80s.
Mm.
And so a bunch of people pulled their money together to purchase those, to acquire those, and started slowly digitizing and cleaning them up. And so you get the unedited recording sessions. And so they played a snippet from one of those recording sessions. And the vice director, who sadly his name currently escapes me, you could hear him and how he is just so aggressively and relentlessly coaching the art. The clip I heard, uh, he had the actor do a fairly innocuous line, like "Let's get over there," kind of thing, like 5 or 6 times, and he's like, "Again, again, again." It was so fast. Like, do it again, more of this, more of that. Just barking orders, right? But I know in past interviews, all of those actors speak nothing but fondly for him as a voice director. So
Weird.
it's this weird thing of like, I, I could see why in modern day all this activity would just be reprehensible. It's like it's abuse, it's manipulative, it's violence in some levels. Um, and the argument, like I made almost kind of jokingly, is like, oh, but the result is great. So I don't support this in any way, shape, or form. I think it's a horrible way of cutting it. I've worked with people on creative projects who act in that manner, and it's never a great result. And I have actual trauma from as a result of some of those projects. Um, but it is weird to me, like if the all the people involved are consenting to it, no one was actually there's no lasting harm from it. I feel a weird place of like, maybe I can't criticize it if everyone's a consenting adult and they're okay with the result, you know?
Yeah, but it's true because we're not in it, so we can't speak to it. But
Right, right,
there's that lingering trauma of that event while it occurred. Like if he told him his wife was going to leave him and fly back, I think to Honolulu, wherever it was, and for that 24-hour period, that's what he's thinking while he's getting drunk by his friend who's done all
right,
this to him. There seems to be something there that, as on a human level, should bother people. But
right.
if he's
And
okay with it,
but I mean, then also to be perfectly fucking blunt, there's a power dynamic here because, like, Strode's, as we're gonna talk about, like, one of the first mainstream black actors oh, sorry, one of the black protagonists in a mainstream Western film, I should say. So is he gonna talk shit about Ford, the guy that got him this job in a historic role?
yeah. Because I'm glad you clarified, because I think we touched on it briefly, but there's were a number of like Harlem cowboy films from the
Right,
30s and 40s that existed, but those were not considered mainstream at all,
right.
and
That's
they're
why
lower
that's why I pivoted,
budgets.
because I was like, wait, no, there are other films. That's why I had to kind of adjust course. But still, like, that's it's gonna be, you know, it's a huge career move for someone like Woody. It's like,
And
so yeah, this guy was an asshole to me, but he got me this great job. So
and if I
you know,
remember right, the singing cowboy, like Cliff or whatever it was actually, I want to say, an Italian man that was dark skinned. That's me vaguely remembering something.
Right.
Who it's murky about like whether or not his father may or may not have been a person of color. So
Right.
it's hard to say, but either way, he felt that he needed to make sure there was representation for Black people to that extent to say that there's murkiness, uncertainty here. Woody Strode is a motherfucking Black dude who has indigenous heritage amongst other things. I know. I think his grandmother was an indigenous person. I think
Right.
that's me having sketchy memories of stuff.
But diversion. But if you're on the Discord, you may have seen me post about this. But since we're talking about people with surprisingly diverse backgrounds, I just found out a couple of weeks ago, at the time of recording, that Peter Davison, who played the Fifth Doctor, has like very close Black relatives. Like part of his family is from Ghana. Like his one of his parents and their family are all from Ghana. And so
Yeah.
it's like, I never would have guessed that in a million years. But like, there was an interesting thread about if you know that recontextualizing Fifth Doctor's tenure in comparison to Shitagawa and whatnot. So like, yeah, it's a case of uh, the point is that it's fun to recontextualize that, but very clearly that was not written to do anything with that material. Whereas this, Ford is being an asshole, but also Ford, because he is John Ford, is able to say, "I'm going to do a movie that's going to focus on this, and what are y'all going to do about it? Because I'm John motherfucking Ford."
So I'm going to take a step back to the Doctor Who piece. Even if people are trying to like recontextualize Davison Run in comparison to Gotwood's Run, they can't be even remotely the same, being that people likely did not know that Peter Davison had that
Right? No,
part of his
totally.
ancestry. Like, and so he's viewed totally as a normal cis white dude with a whole bunch of privileges and everything else associated with that.
Right?
And
No,
coming off the success of like All Creatures Great and Small being Tristan.
no, completely agree. Like it's more with that piece of knowledge. There's an interesting intellectual exercise that results from that. But I brought that up in the sense of like, um, while the as we get closer to now, where we have more options, there's less excuse. But when we're looking at older stuff, it becomes then more interesting to go, is it that their actual heritage is slightly less important than what the director is trying to do with the characters on screen? And so in this case, like, John Ford is very clearly going, I want more Black faces on the screen as Black characters to represent their actual contributions to this time period. And because I'm John Ford, you can't really say no to me in a way you could say to other directors.
Correct. And funnily enough, though, the studio didn't want to say, they didn't want to say no, but like, all right, you're going to do it. You're John Ford. We're cool. You make great Westerns. But instead, have you considered Sidney Poitier
Mm,
or Harry Belafonte? And
right.
Ford was like, I don't want them. They're not, I think he said, they're not tough enough for what he envisioned.
You know what? I could see that. Like, I could see a version with Sidney Poitier doing this, but I don't think it would be the same movie. You're right.
See, I couldn't, because I'm thinking 1960s Sidney Poitier and 1960s Harry Belafonte. I couldn't see a version of them where they're playing a first sergeant. I could see a
Oh no,
version
you're
of
right.
them where they were playing like the lieutenant or the captain, but not Strode,
No,
and
you're right.
definitely
This is
not having like the
1960.
men.
They're not quite to where they hit, like, because that's like 4 or 5 years down the road for them. Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Because even if you go and look at like the duel at Diablo with Sidney Poitier and James Garner, Sidney Poitier plays like a gunfighter in a very, very nice looking suit. I've actually made a character based on that character before I played the game.
Nice.
And I mentioned it
Uh,
specifically because we're not going to cover the duel at Diablo.
okay. See, I don't know anything about Woody Strode, so I'm going with this completely fresh. But I certainly got the energy from him of like, this isn't quite his first acting job, but this is certainly probably his first acting job of this scope. And he
Yeah.
very much energy of like, I may never get a job like this again, so I'm going to swing as hard as I can. Right.
So wow, Woody Strode was a decathlon athlete. I want to say one,
Okay.
two, who is his like some of his contemporaries were. Oh wow, it is early in the morning for me. Jackie Robinson, to give you like
Okay.
a time frame for him and like
Wow. All
who he was
right.
working with. there was like a group of them. God, there were 4 of them that went to the university together, and they had their own specific nickname. This isn't something to note. It's something I just know that I should have put there. But I figured I wouldn't be tired. I would remember, and I don't.
Right.
But there's 4 of them that did like all the exceptional things. Not only that, Strode posed for like naked photos for a art exhibit put on by like a gay artist that was exhibiting it in 1935 Germany.
Wow.
He was amongst one of the
Wow.
people, and the Nazis took it down because they had like a lot of black people in the end.
Yeah, of course. Of
Like
course.
Strode is like did all these incredible things. A lot of it's based on like him just being boom, I am huge, muscular, incredible, and dynamic and charismatic. So his
And
history is worth looking up if you want to read into it.
well, it's funny. We're talking about like I realized I should mildly clarify. I said I didn't know anything about Woody Stewart. I do. I should just clarify as an actor because I do know because it's me. He was also a professional wrestler for a time. And he even wrestled Gorgeous George in the 60s, I think, 50s, who's a phenomenal, very popular, quote unquote, heel bad wrestler, whose gimmick, whose concept inspired ultimately Ric Flair and so on. So the idea of the pretentious, blonde, pretty white man who's a complete asshole to everybody and acts like he's rich and above everybody else is very much started with Gorgeous George. And I know Strode wrestled him at one point in time. So
I guess it's just me that I that is not the type of wrestler who jumped out at me. I will always be a fan of Roddy Piper to the end of
yeah,
time. I don't know why, but just like a badass.
not at all
Or not hit.
Scottish.
All right. So where do we want to get into more of this back history stuff? Also I think Strode is actually a veteran too, amongst other things, in the Air Force. It wasn't
Okay.
called the Air Force at the time though, but like part of the Air Corps essentially. Like incredible
Damn.
backstory, like a bunch of amazing things. And transitioned from like football, I want to say he was one of the first professional black football players after that time period. One of his contemporaries was like the first, I don't think, black football player signed in like modern times or something. It's a lot of very specific wording, but there are a whole bunch of first and near first associated with Strode and like his core 4 people.
So it's one of those things where you can't hang a very easy. He was the first blah on him, but he was sounds like he was very much in the forefront of a lot of different things, and so he's a trailblazer as a person, even if he wasn't exactly at the exact right moment to be the first of a specific thing, or as it were. Sounds like.
Yes, and he shows up in a couple of John Ford films. I think this is the same year he might also play Spartacus
Oh,
in.
okay,
Sorry, he plays a role in the Spartacus movie. He does not play Spartacus. Let me be very
okay, all
specific
right.
in that wording,
I was surprised, like
because
really, but no,
that
makes
was
a little more sense.
Kirk Douglas's Spartacus, I think.
Right. Now that we're saying this, I did the whole time going, why does it look familiar? But I was like, I don't recognize the name. I don't recognize the acting style. I don't recognize the voice. But it may have been very much like he was in the background during minor roles of contemporary films. I do vaguely remember that. Maybe why I'm because he's mentioned Spartacus. Like, I think I have seen Spartacus relatively recently, and maybe that's why I recognize him a little bit.
He's got a long career that runs up to like the 90s. I'm trying
Wow.
to think of
Okay.
something specifically that you may have seen him in. So I don't know. There's a bunch of. You have to go look. It is a long litany of credits, but I'm not sure of how big the roles were in them. He was
Right.
also in The Quick and the Dead. I think was one of his last movies.
Okay. All right. He
And
was in an episode of
case
Buck
people are
Rogers, like
curious,
25th Century.
yeah. In case people are curious, we're going to cover The Quick and the Dead. I know that's probably a shock to many people. Not really
Right.
at all. Yeah. So incredible human being. Um, did you know that this movie, and I think the book, so there was a book that was also published for the movie, but I want to say the book and the movie were published like in unison with each other, support each other.
So, when I looked it up, again, I did very little research on this, so I could be wrong. It was specifically listed as a novelization of the movie, which gave me the impression it was written either after or during the script writing phase, as opposed to the book
I think it
being
was
supposed to the
written
movie being based
during.
off a book. Okay.
It was written during. And that's when they
Okay.
brought in Ford to help make the movie and everything else. To one of my points though is, do you think this came out first or do you think To Kill a Mockingbird came out first?
Oh, I feel like the twist is that this came out first, so I'm gonna go with
It
that.
did. It beat To Kill a Mockingbird by like 2 months.
Wow.
So, it's not like Kill a Mockingbird probably was like, "Hmm, if you're doing that, let me write a book." But very
Something
close.
was in
And
the air.
if people don't know To Kill a Mockingbird, I'm not gonna tell you because that's just basic stuff you should have learned.
Wow. Wow.
Are you wowing that or wowing the fact I gave, like, a hot burn because 'cause I'm tired this morning?
A little bit of both. A little bit of both, honestly. Um, but I mean, again, like one of the things that one of the things I've been enjoying about your curation of this list so far is that it does seem like it's been a nice balance of here's things that you should watch because you're a human being in the 21st century and you should have watched this, which fair. And like here's stuff that no one talks about, right? Because like again, even my casual looking at John Ford's career, like like, is there a John Ford DVD box set? Okay, Charlie Rutledge isn't in there, you know. Um, it was actually a bit tricky to track this down to watch it. Not hard. I mean, certainly there's been stuff we've that are super obscure has been hard to track down. It's nowhere near that, but it was not like most every other movie's been like I do a search, go boop, there it is. You know, this one's like I had to dig a little bit to find it, and like it was on the BFI website, but then it turned out it wasn't actually streaming there yet. It's like, why is this one so hard to find? Now I know why. Um, but it's been neat to see how even though what's been culturally relevant and what hasn't been has been up and down, there's still been a pretty strong thread of quality through these that I really enjoy. Although I do have some questions, maybe during or after the discussion about this movie as a whole and how it fits into everything. But I mean,
Yeah.
this is a. I'm surprised this is not more well known than it is. And I think the only answer is there are so many goddamn westerns in the world that you ultimately have to. Some people have to fall off the list, right?
So first, thank you for your great comments and bolstering me about how I curated the list. I want people to remember that right now for next week. Next time you hear Eddie talks about the movie, I'm about to make him watch. So I want people to remember those
That
high
is
points
specifically why
right
I'm
now.
working it in here because I'm not going to be able to say that with all certainty next week. But we'll get there.
So what we mentioned at the start, this is genreless, and as much as we like to delve into things, we like to try to keep it somewhat light, and we also like to go wacky. And next week is going to be a little wackier.
Right.
Um, Back to this. I know that. So I think the reason that a lot of people don't want to talk about this movie is that it is John Ford in his own way addressing racism, and people don't want
Right.
to talk about racism. People have tried to erase the influence of Black people on like the Western, the genre, history, and everything else. And this movie
Right.
highlights all of those into various degrees of success.
Mhm.
So it's easier for people to just ignore this and say it's one of Ford's bad movies because it was like a decline of his talent at the time.
Right.
Which they also talk about Cheyenne Autumn in '64 because that is something that tries to go and address more of his stock portrayal of indigenous peoples.
Mhm. Which,
So
granted, is in this movie too, so
yes, but the thing is, they can't necessarily write it off because I want to point out again, like the man who shot Liberty Valance came after this movie,
right.
which is a legendary epic. Which part of Haunted West? One of the things we have in Haunted West is like print the legend comes from the man who shot Liberty Valance. So it's
Mhm.
and or it could also be partially that people don't know how to deal with a courtroom based western because like it's a cavalry sort of western, it's a revisionist western, and it's a drama. But when people think western, they don't necessarily think courtroom drama. They don't. There aren't necessarily people riding around massive gunfights every 2 minutes.
Now, and to be clear, I didn't either, right? When I saw, because I mean, spoilers for the first 5 minutes of the movie, but, like, it's pretty clear what this movie's gonna be. It doesn't hide what it's trying to be. It's very clear, and it's like the whole time I was like, "It's just gonna be the frame. We're gonna have the courtroom, and it's gonna be the whole movie in the middle, and it's gonna be the courtroom at the end. It's just a frame for time the movie." Um, and then it's like, okay, well, maybe this courtroom thing's gonna be pretty short, and then we'll get to the movie proper. No, like it's just a courtroom drama. But like, I was until about half an hour in, I kept trying to think of how it's not going to be the thing it very clearly is. I'm with you in that. Like I could totally see people like going, "That's not really a western." And well, maybe the question I was going to ask, maybe we ask it now, like or maybe something to think about as we go through. It doesn't appear to conform to a lot of the tropes of westerns as we've been talking about them before. I think they're there in slightly different form, a bit like when I argued with uh, uh, Stagecoach in a way. Like it's there, but in a way you may not immediately recognize. Um, but I could certainly see why people are like, "This is 12 Angry Men. This isn't a western, right?" Um, but in a way, I'm glad we're doing this also because if we had that we've seen a different John Ford movie, I could certainly see this as someone going, "This is now the time where we need to start breaking those traditions because this genre has a lot of life in it still, but we need to stop making the same movie over and over again functionally."
So, I guess for me, it's harder for me to not see this as a Western because part of it is it deals with the, cavalry, and the cavalry is associated with the Western. There aren't necessarily a lot of movies about the cavalry specifically. I think Ford had 2 or 3 cavalry films before this, but they were
Okay.
starred like John Wayne, and they were definitely more like cavalry out in the field versus cavalry on base.
Right.
But
Right.
we have,
But I
like
mean,
Go ahead.
well, I mean, I would say like my arguments that just barely squeaks it into Western for me is that one of my go-to things is that an outsider comes into a tight-knit community and brings justice to that community, sometimes against its will. Um, but and I feel like if you take the community as the cavalry unit, then it does kind of still work, right? Um,
Well, because
but
they literally have Cantrell coming into literally we're following Cantrell into the town, essentially, finger quotes,
exactly,
and them inferring he's been gone for a while and he's late. So that's a new
yeah,
stranger coming in.
right. And the movie literally starts with him coming into that community. So I mean, it we find out he's been part of the events all along, but it's still from a structural standpoint, it does still kind of work. But the other thing is that and I suspect this is intentional on your part to some degree. Um, the strong running thread of frontier justice and how that has increasingly become a colloquialism for we just want to murder people that we don't like the answer to. This continues that trend. I mean, last episode was very much like, "Hey, frontier justice is just a sop for people in power to do what they want to," and now we have an actual courtroom trial that is basically a kangaroo court until the very last minute it manages to actually remember what it's supposed to fucking do. So that trend also continues. So like, if it happens now happened in 4 films, it's got to count as a trope at this point in time, even though it was a trope I didn't realize existed.
Yes. I love the fact that like you put all when you get to see it, you're like, oh, this is what he's doing. I love
Right.
it. Like that is one of the reasons I think all of this works so well is that like we have similar tastes and we mentioned in a lot of ways about a good 80% overlap. And is that
Yeah.
other 20% is where all the extra magic gets to happen. And I get super
Right.
excited for moments like this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome. I love it.
Um,
So we should
all
talk
right.
about it,
Anything
or do you have more
else?
stuff?
A couple things because I want to take a beat to talk about the cavalry unit itself.
Yeah.
And something I've mentioned in the podcast in the past is that Black people have fought in all the wars in the US. And a lot of that is frequently not acknowledged or anything else. After the Civil War, they specifically made 4, I think it was actually 6 or 7 Black regiments that boil down essentially to 4 in the end. There were like 2 cavalry units, 2 infantry units, and they primarily used them for colonizing the Western expansion is what
Okay.
they essentially put them for. And it
Mhm.
goes into the thing where you're having one marginalized group fight another marginalized group for essentially white people.
Right.
I'm boiling it all down to like the essentials here. If you want more details and depths about it, go buy Haunted West. I talk about it at length for an 800-page book. And that is a lot of what the cavalry units and infantry units did is like part of their goal that the white people had for them. But they also did other things, like I think the National Forest Service. They were like some of the first park rangers, and these cavalry units went and fought in World War One and World War Two until they were finally disbanded. I want to say in the 50s, early 50s.
Okay. And was that well, I was about to ask if that was because cavalry units are being outsized or because of the fact they're black, but the answer is probably a little bit of both.
And that there was also a larger shift, and they became like the more integral. The military forces like integrated again,
Oh, right, right. Okay.
and a lot of that integration deals with Eleanor Roosevelt's hard work. So if you don't know who Eleanor Roosevelt is, she was like one of the married to the president. She worked incredibly hard for civil rights. And there's a bunch of other people I could pull off and list to you, but we're not here to talk about the 30s and
Fair, fair,
40s.
fair. I've forgotten that piece. I was to be fair, my head was more thinking about if I remember correctly, a lot of cavalry units were also functionally turned into arms, like tank units functionally. I believe there's some overlap or restructuring to because I think they were called maybe they're even still called cavalry units. But I know for a while tank units were called cavalry units.
They're still called cavalry units. When I
Oh, they
served
are
in
okay. So.
Iraq, I was served for a while with a cav unit. So
Oh, okay. Well, then you definitely know more than I do then.
if I wanted to get my spurs, I could have spurs, Eddie. But I was like, I don't want to do that.
They still award spurs. That's awesome.
Well, they did when I was in. So it's, but yeah, it's a different story. So anyway, there's a quick breakdown of some black units in history for you.
Cool.
Talked about Woody Strode. We touched on Ford.
Can we talk
Jeffrey
about Jeffrey
Hunter.
Hunter for a second? Just because, or I mean, obviously, being who I am, I was like, oh, hey, it's Captain Pike. I know who that is. But my brain immediately went to I know that Gene Roddenberry, when he made Star Trek, very much pitched it as Dragon Wagon Train to the Stars. That was kind of his
Yeah.
log line for the series. So he was conceptualizing it as a science fiction western from day one. And I believe we briefly talked about how the problematic nature of Johnny Nose turns into the colonization in space metaphor that Star Trek is kind of saddled with, blah, 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 blah. But certainly how he's playing this role here made me feel like Roddenberry saw this movie or one of the other movies that he is in and went, "That's who I want to play Pike," because there's a very thin line between this character and Pike.
Maybe. I was gonna talk more that Jeffrey Hunter's career was always erratic. Like
Oh, was it?
he'd almost completely like fallen off the radar. It was this movie that gave him momentum again to make him more of like a matinee idol style person,
Oh, okay. For some reason, I
because he
thought
tried to start.
so many of these characters are in so many westerns. I thought he was in a bunch of them I just hadn't seen.
Well, he was in The Searchers. That was in '56. But
Okay.
he got in The Searchers because the other person that Ford wanted couldn't do the role. So that's when he got to be here.
Oh, okay.
Because he had some movies, it wasn't necessarily the best movies, and kept bouncing up and down.
Yeah.
And eventually, like he starts his own production company, I think in Mexico is where it is. And he plays Jesus in some other movie that gets him like some more clout. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. He plays Jesus. I think it's called
Wow.
like King of Kings. Um,
Wow.
and so then when he got the Star Trek gig, if I remember right, he signed on for the pilot, but then when the pilot was going to become more, and then we all know they reshot it, but he was afraid of being stereotyped in a TV role and wanted to do movie roles.
Right.
Because
Okay.
back then, TV was like the death of a movie actor.
Right. Right. TV was seen as low rent compared to movies.
Yeah. And he dies young because of some, like, I think there was a, on set, he was doing a movie where there was a car explosion, like the window was supposed to explode out, and he was in the car, instead it exploded in. And he took some, like, he went to the hospital. I think he got treated. And they told him they couldn't find anything, but he might have had some sort of mild concussion, because then later he fell down the stairs because he couldn't walk right, and then he passed away. So he died at like
Damn.
45, like early, like
Damn.
young.
Damn. That sucks.
And yes, I just said 45 was young because I'm an old man.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Young kid, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of like his story, and he does have like, he has the best eyes. Like Jeffrey
Yeah.
Hunter and Meg Foster have the best eyes. I want them to
Mhm.
be villains in my movie if I were ever to make it and I could go back in time and pull people out.
But yeah, but I mean, also Jeffrey Hunter does moral outrage so well, right?
Yeah,
And
that's why he'd
and
be a
so
great villain. He'd be a great Doctor Doom.
yeah, no, yeah, honestly, put a mask on him because he could definitely work through that mask.
Yeah, given the fact we don't care that Doctor Doom's nationality or whatever it is because we cast Robert Downey Jr., so he could be Doctor Doom.
Yeah,
I just made that joke. I
no,
um
I'm so bored with Marvel right now.
Hey, Marvel could be paying our bills one day. Eddie. We could become famous Marvel comic book writers if we played our cards right. We just have to reboot our comics every 6 months. Anything else about the back history of this before we dive into it?
I know it's digging. They have lots to sting, or maybe not. I don't know.
Actually, one more thing.
One
Two
more
of the
thing.
working titles for this.
Uh
I almost used my full Columbo accent, but I chose not to at the last
huh.
minute. The Trial of Sergeant Rutledge was one.
Would make sense.
The other working title that it almost was called, and I wanted to say this specifically before I started because it'll make sense, was Captain Buffalo, Captain Buffalo. We open on Monument Valley because of course we do. It's John fucking Ford. And Ford wasn't going to pass up those buttes. Cue the big, bold Sergeant Rutledge credits rolling across the screen as we hear Captain Buffalo, Captain Buffalo, about the heroism and heartbreak for the first time. Jeffrey Hunter gets top billing. Can you guess why? And Woody Strode name pops up much, much later, heroically perched upon the top of a pile of side characters, buried deep in the credits. As the song fades, a rickety two-seater wagon bumps along to the U.S. Army Headquarters Department of the Southwest. Like it's late for court and it forgot its lines, setting up the movie that's part Western, part courtroom drama, 100% John Ford spectacle. Lieutenant Tom Cantrell, aka Pike, quickly dusts off from the road, and we get a wide shot of a large crowd gathered outside the courtroom. We learn that they want to see a hanging, and everyone thinks Rutledge is guilty. And inside, we see a woman getting a very fancy chair and unusually nice treatment. We get a bit of an interaction between Mary Beecher and Cantrell. Between them is very terse, though. The witness, attorney, tension is set high as a judge and juries enter the courtroom.
So
Captain Buffalo. I'm sorry, what? Eddie? It's like an
I'm
earworm.
surprised you did not make the "I like big buttes and I cannot lie" joke. Just putting that out there.
That's too easy. It's like
I'm not above an easy joke.
that is like low hanging fruit for my jokes, my friend.
I strongly disagree, but okay.
That would get an easy, quick laugh. I want that thinking person's laugh that goes, "Is that funny? Wait a second, that is funny."
Well, what you like and what you get are perhaps two different things. But anyway.
But Eddie, the Rolling Stones told me that. Never mind.
So, watching his write for Johnny Guitar, which admittedly was not the initial intent, is fascinating because I spoke a lot about how Johnny Guitar, the whole movie tried to make, well, let me phrase that. The setup of the movie tried to make you think that Johnny Guitar was the protagonist. It turns out he's actually not.
Yeah.
And this is doing weirdly the reverse, right? It's like, yes, it's called Sergeant Rutledge, but the movie's doing everything it can to make Sergeant Rutledge like he's not actually the protagonist of this movie. To the point where I thought for a minute that Archer was actually playing a character named Sergeant Rutledge until that was clarified for me.
Archer?
Sorry, not Archer. Hunter.
Pike?
I got Star Trek on the brain. Yeah. Oof. Yes, Scott Bakula somehow was in this movie.
I don't know if Scott Bakula could pull off the earnestness of that speech at the end.
No,
or like,
no.
Minor spoiler, when he smacks a guy in the head. I don't think I could see Scott Bakula doing that.
No, I'm not at all. So it's interesting how what was it, like 4 years difference between those two movies? Not much.
Oh yeah.
And so we're already playing with the the character in the title is how they fit into whether they are the protagonist or not space. Because spoiler, Rutledge absolutely is the protagonist of this movie.
But he's nowhere to be seen at the
Right.
moment completely. We've got I wanted to start specifically with Monument Valley is the first thing. Monument Valley is the main character in all these movies. There is no one
Well,
else.
I mean, but again, Johnny Guitar did the same thing, right? Like the main movie is Vienna, and we don't see her for about 7, 8 minutes, right?
Well, I'm speaking more about Monument Valley specifically, making fun
Well,
of John
sure.
Ford because that was his location, and it is highlighted. I think even at the start of like Stagecoach, it's highlighted here. I want to say it's highlighted in most of the other movies. Like that is the main opening character that we get.
Right, right. That and yellow titles because all the font has to be yellow. We only have one font color; it's yellow. Except that.
What did you think of the song Captain Buffalo? Because you're going to hear it a couple more times.
So I have to spoil a minor bit from the very end of the movie. The fact the movie has to explain why that song was chosen tells you everything you need to know. Like I was like, why does this song play? I didn't know until the very end until it was literally explained to me. This is why this song was chosen to represent this movie. It's like then you kind of failed. Johnny Guitar, at least, same thing. They played the same song multiple times, but or not Johnny Guitar. What was the other one that High
High
Noon?
Noon.
High Noon did the same thing. But at least each time you heard it, it's the this is literally the story of the movie, and then you've learned new things as you heard it new times. I did not get the connection until the movie literally told me what it was.
So then I guess, all right, step back to pre-movie. You do know that a lot of the black cavalry units were called Buffalo Soldiers, right?
Did not know that actually. So that is a piece
Okay.
of information I did not have.
So that would have been like common knowledge back then. They were called Buffalo
Okay,
Soldiers. It was a name given generally by like indigenous peoples. It depends on how you want to, which version of the when you go by. Some people say it was because they admired their amazing fighting skills. Some people say it's because of their black people's hair. Some people say it's because of the work the wool code say work. But either way, like the buffalo were considered important to the indigenous people, so that's was sort of a form of a compliment. Some people took it as for a black soldier, so it's a whole thing. The cavalry units themselves did not call themselves Buffalo Soldiers, but it was a colloquialism, and I'm not surprised that John Ford would have then used that for the movie to have someone make a song called Captain Buffalo, which is also wrong because, take it a little further step back, because something else I want to mention is that Rutledge isn't an officer; he's enlisted. He's a first sergeant, which is
right,
fucking amazing and like
right.
top soldier. But for the officer corps, primarily it worked is that you would have black troops, but then there would be a white officer that would potentially like be in command of those black troops, which is a whole history of racism and everything else like that. One of the things I want to mention that I forgot is that there was a Captain Henry. God, what's his last name? I forgot his last name. We talk about him in Haunted West. Anyway, he's one of like the first black military officers that graduated from like West Point and
Mhm.
was supposedly a very on point officer, but he got very friendly with a commander's wife and they'd go on rides together. And people thought they may have been having some special times together.
right.
So he was essentially kicked out of the military because of that. And I can't
Okay,
believe I forgot his name right now. And part of me thinks some of the inspiration for this movie and how it's written is based on his story because I think he was the commander's wife. The commander's last name was Dreyer, and Lucy's last name here starts with D. So I'm making connections in my brain just from history.
sure. I
And
will say that. Oh, go ahead. Finish that. Sorry.
just that his family eventually, like later, decades later, went and had his court trial re-looked at it, and they agreed that he was treated too harshly. And I want to say it was Clinton exonerated him or something.
Oh
Random
wow.
other
Okay.
history.
Wow. Nice. No, I
Sorry, a
was just gonna say that
bunch of
like
history in my brain.
yeah, no, that's awesome. The one thing I was gonna say was that I certainly have noticed a trend also in these movies. None of the movies paint any of the officers in a positive light on either side of the conflict. Like any military officer we've seen has always been in some shape or form an asshole. So it's been interesting to see that trend continue.
Yeah. Back to the opening credits and everything else. All right,
Right. So
history
forget
done.
about the opening credits.
Because there's a lot I could. I'm trying to like minimize Eddie how much I just spout out history at people because this is a movie that would make me want to tell all the history and stuff that people should know that I think they should know they don't know, and I'm trying to
Uh,
like keep that on point.
well, so speaking of Buffalo, sadly, the one thing the song made me think of because it kept coming up. Have you ever heard of the Buffalo sentence?
No, but I've heard of the Buffalo Soldier.
There is a grammatically correct sentence that goes as follows: Buffalo, 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 which translates to bison from Buffalo, whom other bison from Buffalo bully, also bully bison from Buffalo.
I think you just made that up. There's no
No,
way that's real.
it has a Wikipedia page and the whole 9 yards.
Oh my
It's a
god.
real thing.
So we get to the base and you see Kentrell
Buffalo.
dust himself off, and you've got like the crowd of people outside. What were you thinking when you saw like this big mass of people just hanging outside of a courtroom?
Well, I mean, I was not surprised when they're, like, excited to see a hanging because, I mean, and we just came off a couple of movies where a bunch of crowded people were trying to get together to watch someone get hanged. So, like, it was in my brain, to be fair. I was a little predisposed towards that. Um, but again, like, what was interesting was that opening sequence where, like, the comedy of getting the chairs in, for example, right?
Yeah.
How comedically the idea of getting a bunch of people together to watch someone get lynched was played. And at first I'm like, "Oh, this is an old guy who's done a bunch of westerns. How bad is this gonna go?" Right? And it turns out that was intentional, right? The contrast of the crowd treating this as entertainment and at least a couple people on the involved with the tribunal trying to genuinely be concerned for this man's life was the point of the contrast. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
then this is intentional. But certainly for a moment, I was just like, are we gonna have another weird comedic moment like Johnny Guitar had? Although again, we talked through and I figured out why it was, and it turns out it's actually a similar problem, a point here. The comedy was put in to teach the audience here. We're trying to contrast these things a little more.
Awesome. Anything else before we move on to the short next beat?
Um, uh, so, related to the comedy, I also realized the comedy of Cantrell desperately trying to get his uniform in order, like he's literally jumping off the coach to try to rush into the courtroom, right? Um, Sets you up for this is going to be a relatively lighthearted western, and then it just very quickly is not.
Yeah. So something else. Sometimes we'll go and we mentioned before we pull summaries off of Wikipedia and everything else. I did not find a summary of this movie anywhere.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
So Eddie is seeing like a bunch of typos in here because I quickly wrote this like last night, essentially, when I watch it do all this. The 708 marker, we finally get Woody. First Sergeant Braxton Rutledge is being escorted to court by two armed soldiers. Rutledge towers over these
Oh yeah,
soldiers. He towers over the soldiers we pass walking to the courtroom. Instantly, we see white dudes with ropes calling after him. Cantrell has the court cleared, much to the judge's chagrin, as his wife threatened to teach him a lesson later. Rutledge pleads not guilty, shocking the judge. Captain Dickhead calls for Breacher to the stand to throw off Cantrell because she was Cantrell's witness and ask her to recount meeting Rutledge. And we get our first fucking flashback a la Arrow style.
when I saw that, I was like, Chris is gonna be so goddamn mad about this.
And I literally put in the notes, is this Arrow?
We spent
And
so much
stop it.
time
Because,
talking about
like,
that episode, and that's literally the only thing we're ever going to remember about Arrow going forward.
because Ollie did fail his city in the end. The 708 marker is when we finally see fucking Rutledge, Eddie. 7 minutes of like all this other buildup and shit.
Right. So I have to assume, based on the movie is structured, because they're talking about Rutledge a lot before Woody walks in. I have to assume that was meant to be a shock moment for the audience, who wouldn't
Yeah.
necessarily know what the movie was about. I was like, oh, Rutledge is a black man. Oh, right. And we've seen movies where something equivalent was done before. Where like, uh, 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 playing on the audience's inherent bigotry as a plot point. It has to have been that. Um, and certainly the way because I knew what the intent of the movie was. Again, I saw something earlier in the initial courtroom scene, but I feel like that was the point. Was like, oh, this is a mildly comedic, relatively lighthearted movie, and then the fact that Rutledge comes in and the whole movie becomes much more serious at that moment, right? It's very clear Ford's like saying something at this point.
Yeah. Hmm. I'm trying to figure out how I want to phrase this. Um. Okay. Based on seeing Stagecoach and possibly the little bit you know about Ford, can you see a difference in his artistic style from Stagecoach to here? Like just initially.
Yes, although to be fair, I see it more when the testimony. Actually, no, we're in section when the testimony starts. Um, uh, um. So let me take a sec. On the one hand, he's using light and shadow more intentionally here, uh, and you see it more broadly when she's testifying and the spotlight goes on her and everyone else goes into darkness.
Yeah.
So I could tell that he's playing with the fact that these films pick up more detail. There's a richer tapestry to work with, and so he's playing with that in a way that he had to be more aggressive light and shadow just because that's how the old cameras worked. Right, that's one of the reasons why noir movies have that look is because the cameras just didn't pick up light and shadow as easily, and or didn't project them as easily. So you had to work with broader strokes. On the flip side, he's not really doing much with color. I noticed.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, aside from the obvious uh, skin color point of the movie, but in terms of like what people are wearing, and whatnot, it is a bit bland, and I think he's just not used to thinking about that because it's not a medium he's worked in a ton of with color. Color's not been a big part of his movies until this point.
Um, I guess I'll also take a minor step back. There is between, and I am in my notes. That's how he's going to be listed going forward. Anyway, there is some kerfuffle between Captain Dickhead and the judge. You get that. We get they have some past history, and that's when we also learn that Cantrell is in a weird space because he is somehow associated with the case, even though he's trying to defend Rutledge. We don't know what
Right.
yet, so that was a nice setup to some of those moving pieces.
Right. And the other thing is like again, a bit like Johnny Guitar. This movie is confident to kind of throw us in the middle. There's lots of references like well, because of the people present, we're not going to state the actual charge. We're going to just list the violations. And like you said, Shattuck slash Dickhead and the judge clearly have a relationship. And over the course of the movie, we find all this information out. But at the front, we don't need it in a way where Stagecoach did spend a lot more time explaining everyone before they got into the titular Stagecoach. So in that regard, also, I could tell that Ford's a little more confident. Like, no, audiences will get this. We don't have to do it all up front, and so it gets to the meat of the movie reasonably fast. I mean, like it's 15 minutes in before we get to the flash. Around 15 minutes, we get to the flashback, which is the actual story we're here to tell. But there's a lot of setup that happens fairly deftly, especially for a 1960 movie.
And it's also interesting to see that a lot of the humor that would normally be placed on the black character right here is placed on the judge, his wife, and the jury themselves. Like
Yes.
there's a lot of banter going on between all
Yeah,
of
because
those people.
is it the scene where they do the gag about the Confederate law book?
It is.
Okay, yeah. And it was actually genuinely a funny joke of like, hey, wait, this is a book for Confederacy. It's like, read the flyleaf, but read the flyleaf. I mean, it's actually the good bit. But you're right, like, that kind of jokey humor absolutely would have been put on the side characters slash black characters in a movie like this. And Rutledge is just sitting there, arrow straight, you know, being very dramatic. And to be fair, so is Cantrell. He's also trying to reinforce the serious nature of this, while everybody else is kind of like, "Oh, this is just a day out. It's a bit of a lark." Um, and so it is interesting, and it sets an interesting tone of the fact that all of the all basically everyone in the cast except for Rutledge in his defense already know what the outcome of this is going to be. So this
Yeah.
is just going through the motions. And even though no one says that, and the judge frequently tries to give the illusion of impartiality, it's very obvious if you're watching any kind of media literacy. It's like, no, they already know what the answer is. They're just doing this because that's what the book says they have to do.
Aboard the train, we get some instant diversity with Mexicans, Americans, and folks from all sorts of different backgrounds as Contrell hits on Breacher in the worst way possible. Um, Maybe we also get Ford's opinion about the West from Breacher as she talks about how lonely the land is. Contrell lets us know that Geronimo has been captured and Arizona has been, finger quotes, calm before the train conductor kicks Beecher off the train. What the fuck? They kissed before even knowing his name? Come on, come on. Beecher finds a dead body and is silenced by Rutledge as we zoom back into the courtroom with Captain Dickhead using shock and racism to try to win his case instantly. And we get that white gloved finger pointing at Rutledge, and that camera shot of that is,
Mhm.
oh, I was concerned it could poke him in the eye, though, but that's me
Right.
from how close that finger
Yeah,
was. Ow!
bit close. Um, yeah, one of my complaints about this movie is the the Cantrell Beecher romance feels like it's very shoehorned in. You could have cut that entire subplot, and the movie would not change one bit.
But then we wouldn't have our love story, Eddie, and it's a love
Right.
story.
Right. This feels this is a bit where John Ford's age is perhaps showing a bit of like this is what all movies require because that was very much a Hays Code bit, you know.
Which I don't blame him though, because if part of the thing is if you're trying to make this monumental movie that's going to address this whole systemic thing that you yourself were a part of, because we could go back and talk to Ford having cast like Step and Fetch in movies and that.
Right.
Which, if you're curious, that's a very racial stereotype that is placed on black people, and that was like the actor's stage name, and he did a lot of the stereotypical things because that's what he needed to do to be in movies.
Right. Yeah.
And you needed to have something that would try to also keep your audience engaged. Like if you have a whole bunch of white people, and you're going to call them out on their racism, you got to give them something. Like, so we got two pretty people that are going to do what pretty people do in movies while I tell you a story. It's the
No,
it's the opposite of trying to like teach people a lesson by hitting them in the head with a book.
no, and we talked a little bit about that on the Patreon feed with In the Heat of the Night. Right, is like you have to give them something that they're the kind of seed so they can swallow the harder parts of this. So I get that, right? Um, if I were feeling slightly more charitable, because I just genuinely don't know, I could almost make an argument that Ford intentionally undercuts this romance to point out how stupid that it's required to be in here. But I don't think that's quite exactly what's happening. Because you're right, it's this is like Star Wars prequel awkward romance scene, right? And I
Yeah.
know Archer's better at this. Archer, I keep saying Archer. God damn it. I know that Hunter's better than this because I've seen his chemistry with other women in Star Trek. Right, I know he's could do this. So it has to have been written that way that he's kind of awkward and being weird about this. Um, but
Maybe
I don't think
it's,
it's meant to be a deconstruction of romantic subplots in 1960s movies.
I don't think so either. But or it could be. Let me try to give Hunter some credit. Maybe Hunter is thinking like, I'm a military officer that's been around a bunch of dudes. This is the first pretty woman I've seen, and this is how that character would respond and engage with
I
her.
I think it's the intent. I think it's the idea of giving him some depth by contrasting his legal eloquence with his bumbling nature with women. I think that was the point of that scene.
Yeah.
But again, it just kind of lands as like, so you just sexually assaulted what's going to turn up at your star witness. That's not great.
He doesn't know about that yet. Right now, Eddie, he's just a guy who met a girl and wants to do what pretty people do.
Right.
So
And
much
they are
so
very
that like,
pretty.
yeah. Okay. I This flashback, I swiftly cut it off when when we introduced Rutledge and Mary. I love the opening train scene where we have someone who's, I think, speaking Spanish, going through the train, and they're
Mhm.
just going about daily life. Like that's a nice contrast to what we saw for people on the fort versus Mary, who we have coming into town, and Tom, who's just on the train, I guess for reasons, flirting with her. So that's a nice little piece of storytelling that has nothing to do with anything we're going to do.
The other thing I think it actually does, and this is admittedly something I didn't notice at the time, but in retrospect, um, is it reinforces quietly that Cantrell's not an officer, right? He has to ride the train with everybody else. So it wants us to like him more, right? He's not in a special officer car. He's not, getting special treatment. He's just kind of on the train mixed
And
in with
Everyman,
common average folks.
he's an everyman.
Right, exactly. So it gets us to like him more because, like, he's hanging out with again, with Mexicans. He's hanging out with other just folks riding the train. Um, and he's awkward around women, just like I am. Like, so I feel like a lot of this is meant to kind of go, you like, yes, he's a lawyer, but you like him, right?
Okay. What do you think about that? Well, I'm all on that. Um, the contrived reason that they're kicking her off the train so soon,
Yeah,
like that was a bit. There are two things in this movie that really, all right, there might be a couple more, but there are two big ones that really strike me as like super forced, and that is super forced to get her to be at the station by herself,
right.
which doesn't seem like it was something that would have happened given where they were like in 1870 or whenever this was, to have left a a white woman by herself at a train station with potentially one other dude floating around somewhere. That is
Right.
counterintuitive to the narrative that we've always been told and what people would
No,
probably
I,
do.
I completely agree. And also, to be honest, I'm a little surprised Cantrell didn't get off the train with her to escort her. That seems like a thing that would have happened this time period too.
Well, I think I can see him getting back on the train because then that's AWOL.
Oh, fair. That's fair.
Because if he was in the army, then totally 100% agree if he was in the military. Because then he would have been like, I just stay here.
Right. No, that's a good shout. It's a good shout. But yes, it is a bit contrived.
So, all right, I keep thinking of myself logistically. If I was shot with multiple arrows in the chest, how would I then lay onto the bed so that only my back is visible? But when you flip me over, I roll over with the arrows pointing out. That doesn't flip over the bed. They don't break, and they don't move. I can't So this scene put me on the movie so much. Like I'm thinking about the arrow shots of the guy's chest.
So okay, and this is another point where I thought the movie was going a different direction and it didn't, and this is one place where the movie, to its detriment, I thought we were between her getting off the train and then that scene. I thought this was kind of a Rashomon style movie where everyone's testimony is going to be different,
Hmm.
and you have to find the truth between the testimonies. And it turns out no, it's
Hmm.
just more. These are framed. Every flashback is framed as the absolute truth, and it's just we only get the picture when we get different people's sides of the same story, but they're not inconsistent. They're all accurate. And so after that, it's like it was long. Like the movie, I was like, but wait a minute. But then how does that explain? It was very after the movie's over. I was like, but those first scenes then don't make sense anymore. And you're right because it's just badly staged.
But it's all about context. I think is what it boils down to. Like context is king for this movie. Uh, okay. First time you've seen it, what did you think when Rutledge came out and put his hand over her mouth? Like, because Woody Stone's a huge dude, and
Right.
she's like a little bitty woman. Like, pff.
I'm. This is another part where the movie didn't quite work for me because it's so obvious they're going for the a black man has been missing a white woman, and that's scary. And I'm like, no, of course he covered her mouth to get her to stop screaming because she didn't want her to draw attention to herself. And then after we cut sorry for the next bit, we cut back to that's exactly what he says. I'm like, of course that's what he did. It's so obvious is what he did, right? Um, to the point that when the Captain Dickhead starts going, and this is why he attacked her. It's like, did you watch the same flashback I just did? Because that's not what happens. But I think again, I think some of that is that's why I started going. What's actually going on with these flashbacks? Because it's clear she does not want to paint Rutledge in a bad light because she keeps trying to give context and the prosecution keeps cutting her off. Right. So
Yeah.
that part is pretty obvious. So like, okay, I get that part. And again, he's trying to tap into we talked before, very obvious, ancient, and unfortunate tropes about black men of like, they don't want our women, and they're sexually aggressive, blah blah
Yeah.
blah, and that's clearly what he's leaning on for his argument. Um, so like I like the impression like the movie's trying to point out how stupid that argument actually is in the face of reality is kind of like walked away from that. But again, that they're jarred with the impossibility of having arrow stuck in your chest and laying face down kind of stuff, you know?
So I'm trying to think of it from a 60s perspective and how shocking that would have been for the white audience there to like have that be visualized like thrown at them.
I guess
And
so, but
taking into context, at least Ford himself has said that he started off as like an actor and stuntman in movies when he first came to Hollywood.
oh, okay.
And one of the first films he was in was Birth of a Nation, where he played a Klan member. So thinking about that in
Wow.
context of this scene and that
Okay.
whole thing about that lie that they've put onto black people about white women and everything else has like an extra oomph with that historical knowledge for me.
Okay. All right. That makes a lot more sense then.
um all right. Control provides context for the story with another fucking Arrow style flashback. Rutledge explains who he is and the current dire situation. Beecher explains that the station master is dead and that Rutledge Sherlocks somehow how long he's been dead based on how the body fell, giving uh based on what she told him about the guy. And then he says, "You're a Western woman. You know how to fight, right?" And she says, "Yes." Then we get epic gun battles. And Beecher kills one of them. Rutledge polices up the place before the pair settle in for the night. We get some discussion of the reservation as the storm grows in strength outside. Beecher was afraid. She drops some casual racism and attempts to do better while trying to bond with Rutledge, who's been shot. In court, Beecher states Rutledge saved her life.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Weird they don't
Do
have
you
the
want to talk about?
tons.
Do you want to talk about Rutledge taking off his clothes with Mary in the room? And how shocked most of the people in the audience must have been in 1960. Just because Woody Strode's like a good-looking dude, and she's like,
Right.
"Oh, the vapors."
Right, right. I mean, and I, honestly, I guess my problem, my problem's the wrong word. My struggle with this movie is that I have to keep reminding myself, even as we're talking about it, this movie's made in 1960, because in some ways, it's actually a surprisingly modern film. And
Yeah.
so I keep running into these walls of like, why is this a problem? Because you make a joke in here about Shaft, which I'm going to spoil for you. Um,
Damn
but
it.
like in some ways, it feels like almost like a 70s film or maybe even an early 80s film in terms of some of the stuff. Um, and so it's like, you're right. A black man dressing until you say that, it's like, oh yeah, no, that would have been. At the time, I was like, he's got blood in his clothes. Of course, he's taking his clothes off. You know, it's so Ford presents it so matter of factly, correctly to get his message across that when you look at the actual facts, these arguments are nonsense. And contrasting that with the outrage the prosecution keeps throwing, the vitriol he keeps throwing into his arguments, that's the point of it. But it does mean that occasionally when I'm watching it, I'm like, I don't understand what the problem is. But now you keep bringing it up. Oh yeah, in 1960. Oh yeah, no, that would have been really outrageous at the time.
Yeah, and like part of the comment for Shaft is that you don't see Shaft like physically take off his clothes with her in the room. They're either like already generally from right stationed how they're supposed to be, or she's
The
leaving. It
positioned.
is. But here you've got him coming in like literally stripping off clothes with her in the room like it's nothing. But then when she tries to go and like I don't do first aid or touch him, he's very much no. Do
Right.
not touch me. And she's like, "Let me stay in here, let me help." And he's like, "No. I'm trying to help us both by having you not be in this room."
Right. And that was something that was really fascinating because it absolutely does not play as I'm being a big macho man. He's like going, no, seriously, if you touch me, we will both fucking die.
And it's constantly reinforced. And he even says like something about like white women trouble
Mhm.
once again, which she is concerned about staying alive and being here because she's scared. He's thinking of the larger scope of the picture, plus what he's already just endured like yesterday.
Right. And at this point, because we're now seeing a bit of Strode, because up until the flashback, Strode's just basically sitting in a chair looking imperious. But we're actually seeing some actual acting in these handful of scenes here. And one thing I was struck by is that how he's playing Rutledge is, um, it's not monotone, right? Rutledge is a very emotionally constrained character, but it's not that he has no emotions. It's just that it's very clear. It's like I'm a military man. I have to focus on the job, and so you get these tiny little outbursts, like when you touch, like, how it bursts out of him. It's still controlled. He's still in control of the situation, but he's using that emotion tactically. And to get this idea of Rutledge is not a hothead by any stretch of the imagination. He knows exactly what he's doing. Even when he's in a desperate situation, he's like, "This is what you do. This is what you happen." And so he's constantly thinking of all the ramifications of his actions, which is interesting. He's a very tactical, I guess, man, and how he comes across, which is very, very cool.
Yeah, and I specifically make my Sherlock joke because he gets some clues and he deuces things like that is falls in with like tactical piece, and he's like thinking through everything completely.
Yeah. Granted, the actual deductions are pretty fucking ropey. But
Well,
I don't care,
most of
right?
Sherlock's deductions are pretty ropey.
Exactly right. I mean, yeah. It's um. I looked at his pipe and I found out that he's 5'4" and has a limp, and it's like, okay, come on, seriously, you're just making shit up now. So no, I as someone who loves Sherlock Holmes, completely agree with you. But this isn't a mystery story, right? And so it's doing what it's supposed to do, which is that Rutledge is an extremely intelligent man, probably the smartest person in this entire room of the courtroom.
Captain Dighead calls the judge's wife as his next witness, much to the judge's chagrin, even saying, "If you're going to call her, why the fuck do you have me have her leave?" Cordelia brings her whole posse because of all the men, she says. Cordelia's flashback is about Lucy, the victim, how young and lovely she was. We see Rutledge and Lucy are friendly, like an uncle to a niece. Cordelia warns her against being so friendly with his type, while Chris, the store owner's son, is flirting with Lucy. We learn Rutledge taught her how to ride as the white onlookers stare at the pair. She states she saw Rutledge later that night after hearing two gunshots. He was wounded and fleeing. Cantrell has no questions for her as the captain accuses him of wasting the court's time. Cordelia jokes about Atlanta's building. Ah, man, I cut off my own joke in the middle. I don't remember what I was going to say. Damn it, damn it, damn it. I'm going to stop there.
Well, she jokes about looting Atlanta as he burned it, which is the joke. So I'll say one thing. The whole time I was watching Cordelia, I know it's not true, but I kept thinking, is that Betty Davis? Right? It's not. It isn't. But she has the same comedic timing of someone who's doing really horrible, raunchy shit in the nicest possible way, right?
Yeah. Do you
And
mean
so
Betty
she's
White?
Betty White. Yes, I said Betty Davis. Sorry, Betty White.
Because you're saying Betty Davis. I keep thinking to myself, does she have Betty Davis eyes?
No. Betty White. You're right. I'm thinking Betty White. I'm terrible with names today. I apologize, listeners. Much like Chris, I don't have much sleep.
But
No,
yet
Betty
we are
White.
dedicated to our listeners, Eddie.
Yes,
Even
we're
with
doing
no
this.
sleep, insomnia, we push on to talk about this monumental, important movie as old men that can barely remember
Right.
names.
But so what's interesting that happened here is that we talked before about how the Cordelia and her husband, the judge, are kind of a comedic bit, and there's banter. And now the banter is completely unchanged, but now Cordelia is saying increasingly horrible shit.
Yeah.
And the actor doing that, she's doing a fantastic job of keeping that exact same light tone and throwing in quips here and there. So that way she is unchanged as a character. It's just our understanding of her has changed and become more horrific. Again, she just ends with like going, something about like, you got that chair from me back when you burned Atlanta. And it's just like, you're talking about the massacre of an entire city to loot for furniture. You horrible person.
So the other big thing is if people are ever curious what like Southern hospitality looks like, this character I don't think is supposed to be Southern, but that is what it looks like.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you think everything's good and nice, and they're biting you and trying to like bring you down the entire time.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, like all monoliths, there are genuinely people who live in the South who are genuinely decent people. But you're right. A lot of quote unquote Southern hospitality is really just a way to reinforce the status quo.
Hmm. So I know there's a lot of stuff going on that's very serious and everything else. As a as a drinker of spirits, Eddie, I myself couldn't stop laughing when he asked for water, and the guy pours him water. And he's like, "Other water." And he brings it out, gives him like the bourbon essentially, and he drinks part of it, and then gives it back the cup, and the guy downs the rest of it. That
Yes.
side eye he gives him, it made me squee. And then to bring that joke back around again, to have him then drink it, almost give him the cup, finish it to give him the empty cup. Oh,
And it's great structure because, like you said before about the romantic subplot, what Ford's doing is like going, I'm going to keep throwing some comedic bits in here so people can keep laughing at the joke because that means that each gut punch of what's actually being said keeps landing because it's
yes.
always being leavened with humor. And again, all of this humor is sugarcoating the fact that no one is taking this trial seriously except for the people who are on trial and his defense.
And it's the beats that we talked about before in the past with horror. You need to constantly change and regulate the emotional intensity of the scenes so that things hit more powerful when you need them to. Because if it was
Right.
intense the whole time, you'd get dead into that sensation and it wouldn't work. So,
Right.
I love it.
There's also another social dynamic that's fascinating. So it is uh, it is Hunter's character who asked for the courtroom to be cleared. Say, listen, this is and he leavens the women as his reason because of the nature of what we're talking about here. Maybe we should clear the courtroom because the ladies may not want to hear it. But it's very clear he's trying to get the very aggressive men out of the courtroom, right? And then over the course of the trial, the prosecution keeps finding excuses to bring chunks of that courtroom back in. So like, and on top of all of that, like obviously none of this is following any kind of remote sensible procedure because it's a movie, but also the movie kind of acknowledges the fact that like the judge a couple times calls out the prosecution's violations of process, but does nothing about it.
Yeah.
And so what we're seeing is like again the pretense of fairness, right? The judge needs to be perceived as being fair, even though that's not actually going on. And we're not quite, the movie hasn't quite tipped yet over into how much of a farce this actually is. But it's certainly you're seeing the seams of like everyone thinks this is a joke except for Rutledge and his defense.
Well, and also it goes along with the old school lines of like the mob mentality. So the more
Right,
people they bring in, the more it bolsters Captain Dickhead. So in one sense, it could be that he is somewhat concerned that Control may be making a few solid points.
right,
So he offsets that by bringing in more and more of them, which definitely then downplays anything Control was saying because a crowd is never going to be on Control's side.
right. Now, another point I'll give to Ford in the script is they start to introduce what turns out to be the actual plot of the movie, and I had no idea it was going on. Right, the whole Lucy and Chris stuff very much comes across as just like, oh, this is just background stuff that's happening because we're really focused on Rutledge here, and we're trying to make sure he's innocent. And it wasn't until very late in the movie it's like, oh, that was actually an important part of the plot that I just glossed over. So there's a point later in the movie where it's like, what the fuck is going on? It's like, oh no, the movie actually did give me all the information, but like a good mystery, buried it.
Are you saying that's like a Ryan Johnson move where he shows you specifically what happens and then doesn't talk about it?
Not quite that bold and deft, but certainly vibes of that, yes. It is not quite, we're literally gonna commit the crime in front of you on screen. That's not that good, but it's certainly of like, hey, these other minor characters, yeah, just don't worry about them. They're not important. Oh, wait.
On the stand, Dr. Etner gives us his fucking Arrow style flashback, which kicks off the murder scene investigation, which Control was a part of. He tries to break up the busybodies before entering the scene. The major was shot through the heart, and Lucy assaulted and killed. One of the cavalry tells Control about Rutledge fleeing the base, but he can't believe he'd do this. Three Apache raiding parties have been attacking the area recently. The doc confirms both bodies were moved and confirmed his findings. Control again has no questions, which the judge loses his shit over.
uh, this is one point where I got a bit confused. And I suspect I may have missed a line somewhere because one of the downsides of again, the movie's a bit hard source. I couldn't find it with subtitles, so I think I may have just missed a couple lines. Is Control actually like military police or the equivalent, or
No,
is he
I just think
just
he's
some
an
dude?
Okay.
Okay, so he's just some dude that stumbled in and decided to take over the investigation.
Essentially. Because
Okay,
if I'm trying to think of it from like an 1870s cavalry perspective where you have a bunch of enlisted soldiers.
right.
And if your enlisted soldiers are primarily all black, the white people in charge don't think they're smart enough to be able to do their jobs. So that's why they have a
Okay,
white captain that's there that would come in.
all
And that's
right.
why the doctor is there. So Control would be there because he's the white guy. So he'd, of course, know what to do.
Okay. The one part of this whole movie that of everything going through, I'm shocked the prosecution didn't bring up, but in retrospect, because they assumed the whole trial was a rig, they probably just didn't bother. Is the completely obvious conflict of interest that Control has,
They
right?
do. They reference it by saying it's strange that he's there, that he's taken on the case. We even have Mary saying, given your association with it. So it's there, but it's
But it's
not like
oblique. I mean, he could have just straight up said, "Listen, we're just throw this whole case out because the defense was also the investigator and was also heavily involved in it. So just throw the whole case out, right?"
that's like being in the game and saying, hey, you're one of the main characters. You can't do that.
Right, I know. And that's the thing is like, it's a bit rope. It's like, man, we just in one version of the script we had three different characters, but it's like we just can't quite afford that many actors. So can we just combine them all and give them all to Hunter because he's really great? It's like, yeah, sure, it's fine. We do that.
I can't see John Ford having financing problems with this movie. Although
I know.
one of the things is I tried to do like some quick searches about how much the movie cost and how much it made. Nothing. And I didn't spend long, but I did some like couple of Googles. Like, no, it is unknown how much the movie cost. One thing I saw that John Ford got paid $300,000 to make the movie, so I was like, that can't be accurate.
Right.
To just a budgetary thing. It's fascinating that I can find how much other movies cost quickly, but this one, like, no information. People like scrubbing it out of existence. Which
Yeah.
I bet our listener will go and look and find it and be like, hey guys,
Yeah, it's right here. Why can't you just find it? So because the internet's full of lies right now because it's all AI bullshit.
yep, yep. All right. I loved I love seeing all the black soldiers. I cannot
Yeah.
stress enough
Yeah.
how fucking amazing it is. Some of the acting they force them to do is not my favorite acting,
No.
but they're all on fucking screen. And one of the things I did see is there was a black historian, who says this movie made him decide to become a historian because he's got to see other black people in roles.
Cool. Yeah. So, to your point, like I saw that and I was like, "Oh man, some of this acting is really rough." But immediately I was going, probably because they've never had spoken fucking lines before in their lives,
And there's a certain style of acting that was acceptable for black people
right?
that was
Um,
reinforced.
and it's clear that Ford doesn't want that, right? But I mean, to your point, uh, there are I think 5 black characters with spoken lines in this movie.
I think there's
It's
more. They get like minor
maybe
characters. They have like a word or two, but
okay, fair. But like, okay, people with like full sentences. There's like still more than one hand or more, which is fantastic for a 1960 movie.
yeah, yeah.
Fantastic for a movie now.
A mainstream
Yeah.
movie in
Hmm.
1960. Fucking phenomenal. Um, the doctor specifically does mention like he covered the body. So there are
Okay.
little beats like that showing you that there's a there's a layer of concern, and even during the crime scene themselves, the clues don't make sense for what they're trying to tell the story to be.
Hmm. Interesting. I had missed that connection.
Anything else in this piece before we move on?
Uh, the the judge losing his shit to Cantrell is fascinating because at the first time it happened, I was like, it could almost be played off as, "Kid, you don't know how to do your job. Let me explain how his job works." And now it's like, it's so clear. He's like, "No, he wants a specific performance." It's like, "This case needs to go a certain way in my head, because if you're not asking questions, those questions can't be cut down."
Yeah.
And so, like, he needs his case to go a certain way, and it's not going that way. And he's so to the point where he's just straight up telling the case how it needs to go. And it's like, you're now no longer hiding how much you are intentionally trying to railroad this case.
And I love the fact though, like Control's thing is that I only ask questions if it's not true. So like already
Yeah.
saying like they're telling me facts that we know these are facts. There's nothing
Right.
to dispute here.
Right.
Oh. Uh Captain Dickhead points out Control's unusual association for
Okay, there it
calling
is.
him to the witness stand. During Control's fucking flashback, he's patrolling. Control and the men capture Rutledge. Beecher tries to get them to let the first sergeant. Ah! Beecher tries to get them to acknowledge the first sergeant and that he defended her. Rutledge orders the men to fight and prepared, but what the fuck did I write here? I must have been sleeping when I wrote this. Uh, Sorry. You know what? I'm not gonna apologize. I admitted I wrote it last night. Essentially, we get Control in the stand. Control then essentially breaks in, captures Rutledge, and Beecher's there. And Beecher says that Rutledge tries to save her life.
Right.
Control doesn't really believe him, but doesn't believe Rutledge did those things. And he tries to have like a one-on-one talk with Rutledge and says that goes against everything he believes Rutledge would do. Rutledge refuses to let anyone help him, which Eddy, I hate that. I hate it the most that like your entire plot revolves around me not telling you one fact.
Yeah.
Then we get some more bonding with the troops. That's essentially it.
Yeah. I mean, that and also, um, it, it the movie tries to explain it, and I feel like it mostly succeeds, but there's still kind of a whiff of Rutledge ran away because the plot demanded that he look a little suspicious.
Yes. Which
Because
now I'm
Rutledge's
not gonna
argument as to
lie.
what, I was go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, I was just gonna say, like, Rutledge's explanation as to why he ran is the part that I find the ropiest.
I don't find that part. The fact that if he has worked with Control this long and knows Control would believe him, it seems strange that he wouldn't tell Control his whole story. That like
Right.
spoiler, I walked in on this shit and this is what I found. Versus him assuming that every other person was going to assume that he did it, which they will. But I can see why Rutledge would leave because if you were assumed to have done that as a black man to her and killed him, you're hung. Like there would have been no trial. He would have been dead right then.
No, okay, that's a good point. I think I'm expressing myself badly. His explanation as to why he ran, the fact that he ran is not the part I have issue with. How he explains it to Contrell is the part I have issue with. So I think we're talking about the
Yes,
same thing.
we are. Yeah, you're right.
Is because it makes Contrell go, "Why'd you run?" And Rutledge's like going, "Because I'm a fucking black man. I didn't do shit. It doesn't matter, right?" That should have been the answer, but he didn't. He was like, "Well, let's pick out blah blah blah. I can't just because I don't want anyone to touch me." It's like, buddy. And
Yeah.
again, like it's on the same time though, it does paint Rutledge as a complicated character. It is in some ways extending from his conversation with Mary, of like, where he's saying, "Don't touch me because we'll both get in trouble." Now he's extended that to an emotional and social context. Like, no one can touch me because we'll all get in trouble. And it's like, okay, that's actually not true. So like it presents him as an interesting character. The problem is, I think it's the only place where this comes up. So it's an isolated moment that it also reads as just kind of a bit of clumsy storytelling. Because you're right, a lot of these dramas center around people not having adult conversations.
Because now I can understand why he would say that to like the other Ninth Cavalry soldiers
Right,
because they're
right,
all black. And then they would be
right.
painting it with the same brush he is, which is like his entire line that I showed at the beginning. It's like
Mhm.
he has so much belief that the Ninth Cavalry's work is going to essentially, finger quotes, speak for the race that it has to be perfect,
Right.
which falls into that old stereotype that if you're a marginalized person, you have to be 2 times better to get half as much, is what it is.
Right.
Mm. I'm going to move on because I don't know
Yep.
what I wrote up there. So that did not help us a lot. So
What the hell that was?
on the ride out to Beecher's farm, they discover a dead man. On him, they find clothes that make them think it's Chris Hubble, the shopkeeper's son, who had been interested in Lucy. After burying him, they keep riding. Sergeant Matthew Skidmore is called by Captain Dighead to the stand and questioned. His story continues, controls. The lieutenant frees Rutledge to aid in the skirmish before the man flees. The cavalry continues towards Beecher's home, which this is a point we get that Control is on his job so much that he would have shot Rutledge in the back fleeing. And Rutledge
Mhm.
only saved because Skidmore intervened slightly, and then Mary slapped the whole gun down to get hit with a rifle.
Right. There's also an interesting bit because earlier on, as a throwaway line, it wasn't worth covering at the time, where Rutledge asks to have his cuffs undone, and Cantrell says, "No, that's only in case of emergency." And of course, Rutledge makes a joke of like, "Is this an emergency?" Right? But it's not. No. And then when the attack happens, he does in fact, without speaking, undoes the handcuffs so that Rutledge can grab a gun. Um, so in these bit of like showing, not telling. We had to tell
Yeah.
earlier on, so we didn't have to tell in that. So we didn't have to have our conversation of like, take my handcuffs off because we're being attacked, right? You didn't have to do that. We could just go right into it, and it also showed that Cantrell unthinkingly trusts Rutledge.
Yeah.
It's like, you're fine. You won't do anything. Just take your handcuff off. So it was a good way of structuring that to show just how much these two men trust each other. Which again, in the context of the previous scene, is frustrating because like if you trust him that much that you will let him shoot somebody and let him go, why don't you just talk to him?
Yes. But it also then goes and shows you how much Control's job is important to him, that he would kill this person that he trusts that much trying to flee. So
Right.
it's reinforcing who
Yeah.
they are. And we get to see Top Soldier run right after the other person that's been shot to try to save them. And we get that touching moment, just two black dudes on a screen, him trying to comfort someone that's dying. Like,
Yeah.
fucking
Yeah.
amazing. Eddie, I don't know if I've ever seen that in movies before this, from movies I've
Yeah.
watched.
Yeah. And to your point earlier, none of this is being played for comedy. Just mildly to the point of the black characters all seem a touch bit humorless, but considering how much they're overcorrecting, I'm not mad about that in any way, shape, or form. Right. Um,
Yeah.
So it's like I get what's happening here. I get why it's happening. So I'm not in any way suggesting it needed to change. But you're right. Like every moment with them feels touching and human and warm in a way that the white characters are just joking about getting someone killed. And it's like it's such a stark, clearly intended contrast.
Anything else before we move on? I'm trying to see if there's anything I missed.
I think this is the part where um, Shattuck starts to heavily imply that Cantrell intentionally subverted the course of the investigation.
Yeah, you're right, because he implies that he's missing things on purpose.
Mm-hmm. Which again, like, so at that point, she should have been like, so this whole case is thrown out. None of the defense is valid. And it's like, there's such an obvious argument. But again, like, I could almost headcanon it in a way of like, this guy's so confident that, of course, they're just going to hang the uppity black man that she didn't have to bother with this. He's so arrogant.
And so there's like all this tension and everything else, and we're building up more and more tension to quickly undercut it by having the judge say that, yeah, you know what? I might have missed that shot myself at that range. And
Mm-hmm.
my buddy, that guy in uniform, laughs at him,
Yeah.
essentially, inferring that he cannot do it even if Rutledge's like 5 feet away. Like,
Right.
that is great tension because like built up emotion, humor, and it resets your playing field. Rutledge is finally called to fucking testify. He planned to escape until he saw the Apaches kill Beecher and return to 8th and 9th Cavalry, his home. Epic fight scene.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really the only real fight scene in the whole movie. Captain Dickhead tries to make it all about his pride and bravery being his Achilles heel, but Rutledge's sincerity is all about his home, his friends, and the fact that 9th Cavalry gave him self-respect as a man. The court takes a recess to drink whiskey, play cards, and pat themselves in the back for not saying Rutledge is black. You know what? we're good people because we didn't acknowledge his race.
The
Oh, and that is like a slap in the face. Like,
that
oh.
whole thing, like, we're gonna take a recess and go back and play cards because again, they're so fucking unconcerned about this, and the whole time you're really going, the real heroes are us for not saying he's black. It's just like every white moderate, you know.
And Eddie, this movie is like nearly 2 hours. That's like an hour and a half into the movie where they
Yeah.
finally get there. And they go, boom.
Right, and again, there's a couple of minor lines that we kinda glossed over where the judge makes side references to, we're not gonna put into evidence this man's skin color, right? And so this back padding comes across as a building of that, even though everyone's actions during all of this are inherently racist. And again, this also falls apart in the very next scene, right? Um, but just but again, like, there are several times where the prosecution pretty clearly was walking up to that line, and the argument wasn't, "Your argument is racist," it was, "Just don't say these words," like,
Yeah.
all through the movie. So it was again, you're right, it's so obviously, and it's done as a joke. It's done as a gag. And so it's like, Ford is just on fire because it's like, "Hey, this bitch you're laughing at? It was racism all along."
But he has to do it like this because
Yeah.
the audience
Yeah.
themselves are thinking, we haven't talked about that. He's right. We're pretty good. And then to have it bluntly stated to you in a way that you cannot ignore it. Like, fuck.
Mhm.
Oh.
Right, it's like
Um,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna transition to like the camera work with Woody and that half light that Ford uses for that scene with
Yeah,
Woody
that's so
is
good.
perfect.
Yeah, and a parallel to, what they did at the very beginning with Mary.
Yeah. Um, Cantrell calls Beecher back to the stand, who recounts hearing of her father's death and what all happened to Rutledge. She believes Rutledge is innocent. The troops sing softly, Captain Buffalo, that night with the moon hanging in the sky. And some of them praise Rutledge as a top soldier and saying that he's going to go meet the president himself, which is undercut by, I forgot the sergeant's name, who's saying, nope, the lieutenant is going to take him to stand trial because that is the kind of man lieutenant is. And Cantrell finds the gold cross.
Right.
I'm pausing there
Um,
because the next beat is going to be in the movie.
um, at this point, I was a bit like, okay, so what's happening? Again, I kind of thought, 'cause I've seen movies like this where it's like, okay, the court scenes are still the frame, so we're gonna resolve this in flashbacks, and then the course is gonna kind of have a perfunctory ending. Um, I was not prepared for the Ace Attorney bullshit that was about to happen. At this point, I was like, okay, it's a neat scene. It's a nice, quiet moment. Again, reinforces Rutledge's character and his um, conflict between his belief that the army and the unit gave him a purpose in life and something he values and honors, while trusting a system that very clearly is rigged against him. And I
Yeah.
liked how they showed that conflict in a very strong way without being too maudlin or melodramatic about it.
And if people are curious, that still holds to today.
Mhm. I believe it.
All right. We've come a long way to get here. In the closing arguments, we get Cantrell sort of going over and recounting the case, and he pulls out like the little gold cross that he talks about, and ends up putting the entire blame on Chris Hubble, who is a person that did it and who is dead. And
Right.
Captain Dickhead flips the fuck out and talking about how could you be blaming that white boy for that white boy didn't do anything. And like the number of times he says white
Yes.
is staggering before he goes
Mhm.
back and then literally says that black man, because I couldn't remember if they were going to drop the N word, Eddie, but they did drop it once because they had Rutledge say it earlier in the movie.
Right.
But he does not say it, and it rants and raves and like the entire thing until I forgot the name of the store owner. I can't believe that. The elder Hubble stands
Right.
up and comes up and says that he can recognize a cross that Control can't. And then we get him breaking down and essentially saying that Lucy was asking for it, and so he did all that to her. which then goes back to Rutledge discovering the body to cover it, and then her father coming in and assuming the worst, and Rutledge having to kill him in defense. And Rutledge is found not guilty, and we shoot outside to Mary and Tom making out like kids in the schoolyard as Top Soldier marches a group of soldiers past him, smiling and saluting their kissing. End of movie.
So, let me preface by saying I loved all of this, but not because it's good. Because I was not joking when I said this is some Ace Attorney bullshit, because this was like, and here's the evidence. And it's like, but here's the counter. Like, okay, so the coat aside, I found this coat with this guy's initials on it, and it's covered in blood. Airtight evidence. Like, dude, I can see a hole through that, and I'm not even trying, okay? Whatever. The gold cross. He presents the gold cross. And he's like, this gold cross was found. And even I was like, it's a pretty generic looking gold cross. To which the prosecution immediately undercuts that exact same argument. Like,
yeah.
And then he's like, I have brought a whole bunch of these exact same gold crosses. And I'm like, now hang on. You didn't know the gold cross existed until 5 minutes ago, buddy. When did you get a chance to, you know what? There's a small chance that gold cross become the evidence. So I'm just going to go ahead and buy a bunch of gold crosses for dramatic effects.
And of course, it's shock and awe.
But I'm like, okay, whatever. It's a maybe because this story was so compromised that he actually got advance notice of the cross and was prepared for it. And maybe the outrage about the gold cross was performative. Okay, fine. I can kind of sort of think. But then it's no, wait, there's a nick in it that no one noticed in all the times that he was carrying around and staring at because we see a shot of him in the flashback staring closely at this cross. He somehow missed this nick. And then I'm like, all right, but we got there, and so the father's going to confess. And the whole time we have Cantrell writing in big letters, coat, too big. And I'm just like, you just presented this evidence. And the 5 seconds after you present the evidence, like this is absolutely the coat of the guy who killed him, you're not going, now wait a minute. I now see the holes in my own evidence that I just presented myself. And I'm like, this is why I was asking, is this his job? Answer is no, it's clearly not his job. He's making this shit up as he goes along. And that's fine. But it was the most, what a twist. Well, this is also a twist. And the double twist. It's like in short succession. It's like, I loved it, but it's nonsense.
I can't figure out for life of me why the father came forward. It doesn't make any sense. I guess they want to say that he was racked by guilt of his own actions and everything else to see all this going on.
No. I mean, honestly, that makes sense to me. Is the father, from how I read it, the father was like, okay, they're closing in on me, but the defense is arguing my son did it, and he's already dead. So I'm going to go ahead and confirm that. So they blame my dead kid, so I get off the hook. Because I was hoping the black man would get killed. That's not going to happen now. So let me shift the blame onto my son so I can still walk off. And then that's when Cantrell suddenly remembers his evidence is full of shit and turns it around on the guy. Him breaking down and confessing was the most contrived part of it for me. It's like, if you just lied a little bit longer, you would have gotten away with it.
If he just sat there, given the crowd, he would have got away with it.
Right.
But it's the fact that Cantrell literally code. Punches him in the head, Eddie. Like, that is the part of the movie. Like,
right, which fair, I was all for, but
Eddie like falls down the chair and everything else, and there. I mentioned there are two big parts of the movie. This is the other one. Like the ending doesn't land.
No, this is some straight up. All of the villains have to immediately get the consequences of their crime as soon as they're revealed. Hayes Cody bullshit of the movie. Yes.
Yeah.
Which again,
I think,
given that most of Ford's work was during the Hayes Code, it's probably just ingrained in him at this point.
Since I think we're here, what are your final thoughts of the movie? Because we're like dancing on them anyway. So, final thoughts of Sergeant Rutledge, 1960.
So, I mean, I like it. Surprising no one. So far, I've liked all of his movies. Well, surprising me, I suppose. But I like the movie. Again, it was very much every Star Trek episode where they spend the entire time arguing passionately in a room and being emotive about moral things, and then doing flashbacks that we slowly build together a picture, and so finally nonsense evidence is revealed, and arbitrary stuff comes up to exonerate the people that we like. It's I've seen that episode 100 times. I love those episodes. Again, it's Ace Attorney colon Wild West. I think it's great. Um, it's I could see why some people are going, it's not a Western. I don't agree. I'm with you. I don't agree that it's not a Western. Um, but I could certainly see that we are on the cusp of people radically reinventing what a Western is. I could see
Yeah.
how this points towards that next step. The fact it's coming from John Ford, who everything I've heard from you is that he was a very traditional director in that regard. Knowing that this is part of a rough trilogy of movies where he's trying to himself rewrite that makes a ton of sense. And I can totally see that. Even though he's still steeped in how things are done, that there's bits and pieces of movie. I think the ropiest parts of the movie are parts where he's like trying to shove it into that mold, which some of you've eloquently argued is 1960 needed to happen. But I can certainly see how if a director who was not John Ford 10 years later tried to make this movie, it would have been a pretty different film.
Yeah, but they wouldn't have got the kind of type of budget that John Ford would have got.
Right. 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 So this is definitely dancing a lot of lines. And the fact that I kept forgetting those 1960 movies shows you how a lot of this movie could have really worked today. I mean, it's a really strong film. Um, I was really surprised and happy with Woody Strode's performance. Um, uh, it's such a good balance of humor and even like you said, I know what the humor was doing. It was trying to distract me a bit from what's really going on, but I still laughed. It's good actual humor, and so it's like it did the right job of haha. Oh shit, I should be laughing at that. It, which is right. That's how that should feel. That's how that should play. So yeah, I mean, ultimately, I'm a bit mad this isn't talked about more. Apparently, about John Ford's oeuvre because it's a really good film. Maybe I just need to watch more of his other films, but this is a good film.
I will not confirm or deny that. For instance, Jeffrey Hunter was in. I think I mentioned The Searchers, and The Searcher is considered John Ford's like best film, but it's a film that we purposely did not cover because it's not one of my favorite John Ford films.
Fair enough.
But to Sergeant Rutledge, I mentioned before this is like the second or third time I've ever seen this movie
Mhm.
because we all know that Chris hates a flashback.
Right. Yeah.
Really is what it boils down to. And part of the reason for my summary as being quite as choppy as it was is that the movie itself is a bunch of scenes put together. And I know all movies are scenes put together, but it is
Mhm.
specifically different from how this is framed. It is taking out bits of the story and sharing it between multiple characters and trying to play a lot of gotcha moments, which is what the intent was. And I like the movie, but it is not a movie I would run back to watch frequently. And if it wasn't genreless, we wouldn't have covered this movie. But because it is genreless, it is a monumental film that other movies like Buck and the Preacher, The Harder They Fall, likely would not exist without John Ford's work to put a black person in the predominant role of a Western film that changed how other people view Westerns completely. Because
Mhm.
it wasn't one of the Harlem movies that were more comical and upbeat, but it was an actual real representation of real black soldiers fighting for like their space and against an antagonist that white people don't have to go fight. And it's all played out on screen for audiences, which is a monumental feat. I recommend people see this movie as homework, but it's not a movie that I would go back and watch for joy or pleasure.
So what I'm hearing is that you're glad this movie exists and you definitely appreciate what it's doing, but it's not a movie you go, hey, I'm thinking I want to watch a film. Let me throw in Sergeant Rutledge.
Correct. But I would do that with like Buck and the Preacher, which is Sidney Poitier's, I think, first directing movie that stars him and Harry Belafonte
Mhm.
going around the West having wacky shenanigans, fighting and killing racists.
So yeah, it does sound like a lot of fun.
Which we're probably go for the Patreon, and because it's not in this run right now.
Right. Instead, we're gonna watch. We've built this up. Apparently, the movie is called Billy the Kid versus Dracula.
We got to go back to our roots, Eddie. Like we've been some highfalutin people for a while. We need to go back to where we really belong.
Billy and the
Schlocky,
Kids
D-rated movies.
versus motherfucking Dracula, 1966. I have,
I,
again, never seen this movie. I have
I
no
could have
idea
went.
what's
It
going to
was.
happen.
I think there was one where he fights Frankenstein, Eddie. I could have did that one.
Oh, God. This feels like some Santo. I'm a Mexican wrestler and I fight whatever is interesting this week style of movie. We'll see. We'll see.
If people are so excited to hear you talk about that movie, where can they like contact you and maybe buy your stuff so that you don't get too mad at me for making you watch this movie?
Um, well, if you want to contact me, you can contact me via Blue Sky. That I'm there at Pugsteady. I did have a Mastodon account, but I hadn't been talking about it, and I barely check it, so I just shut it down. Really, Blue Sky has ended up being the survivor of the social media wars in a post-Twitter landscape. But Pugsteady.com is
Barely.
barely. I mean, it's good enough. That's also a website where you can buy my stuff, including my silly dog game, realmsofpugmire.com, where just recently I have posted on Blue Sky the stats on doing legally distinct Sonic the Hedgehog in Realms of Pugmire. So there you
Whoa.
go.
Um, if you're looking for me, you can come to Blue Sky, which is where I post. I don't know why. Like 8 people see me post. Darker Hue. If you want to support me, you can go to my Patreon, where I'm thinking about adding a whole new tier to my Patreon, where I
Ooh,
have like a lo-fi gaming thing with Chris, where people pay like a couple bucks. Like I think it's some price point I'll set. I don't know what it is yet, and you'll play one game with me a month or 2 games with me a month. Because I miss running games. I got a whole bunch of shelves. I got a whole bunch of games on my shelves I want to run.
that
And
sounds fun.
I like
You should
money.
do that.
So it would be me running games, drinking scotch while we either play in some format. Otherwise, I can't wait for Eddie to watch the next movie.
Yes, and apparently it's on YouTube, so there's going to be loads of fun.
It's going to be a low quality version. Go for a high quality, Eddie. Why don't you go out and like run around London, tell them this is a movie that you want to order, special Blu-ray edition, like HD everything.
I just checked the stats and I love the fact that one of the writers is Bram Stoker. Like Bram Stoker actually wrote this fucking movie. This movie's gonna be awful. All right, we will see you next week. We'll see what actually happens.
Blah, blah. I want to suck your blood.